Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well and keeping safe. I'm Rahul Hakeem, and I'm a director with the telecommunications practice at KPMG India. I'll be your moderator for today's session in IMC 2020, and we'll be discussing the role of SDN and NFV in building smarter networks for resilience and efficiency. Cloud native organization continues to be an often debated topic, and from a business perspective, the discussions have been around augmenting and replacing native hardware with cloud based network solutions. Global telecommunications surveys have projected the SDN market to be worth over $50 billion by 2022 and expect to grow exponentially thereafter. Talking about India, telcos and enterprise are increasingly leveraging SDN and NFV technologies, and India is estimated to be a $3 billion market currently. We are privileged to have today with us a diverse panel comprising of technocrats and senior industry leaders who are representing a telecom operator, OEMs, new age digital companies, and startups. I'd like to thank all of them for making time to participate in this discussion and share their insights with us today. I'm honored to have the opportunity to introduce them to our audience. From the United States, we have with us Mr. Manish Mangal. So, Mr. Manish Mangal is the CTO of Network Services at Tech Mahindra. He has an accomplished telecom career and is a industry professional with over 20 years of work experience. He is an expert in leading and large and global teams, developing end-to-end technology solutions and managing strategic partnerships that directly improve enterprise value. He's also the holder of multiple patents. Next, I would like to introduce Bernie Trudel. He joins us from Singapore and represents Ericsson. Bernie Trudel is the lead NFVi cloud uh, uh, lead for NFVi Cloud for Ericsson, Southeast Asia, Oceania, and India. He is a strong technology leader with a track record of building and mentoring teams for emerging technology domains, as in and is an expert in the cloud computing space. Closer home, we have with us Mr. Mudit Agarwal from Vodafone Idea Limited. Mudit is an executive vice president, technology planning at Vodafone Idea. Prior to Vodafone Idea, Mudit has had multiple roles with BCG and McKinsey and has also been previously an Indian Telecom Services officer. He has over 25 years of experience in telecom and technology sector across 8 countries with leading telcos, network providers, software developers, and system integrators. We'd also like to introduce to you Mr. Sanjeev Kapoor from Truminds. Mr. Sanjeev Kapoor is a co-founder and CTO of Truminds Software Systems. He is a hands-on technology leader in high-tech software and communications with over 20 years of experience in the Indian telecom sector. He has significant experience in building products from scratch and scaling them up to profitability, defining roadmaps for various products and business lines. We'd also like to introduce Ms. Krithiga Thakkar from Red Hat. She's a director of consulting at Red Hat India South Asia and has over 16 years of experience in business development, consulting, project management, and delivery. And with over 8 years of global leadership experience, she has positions of country head, practice head, and delivery head. And lastly, joining us from Israel is Mr. Jonathan Homa. Jonathan is a senior director of solutions and marketing at Ribbon Communications and has in-depth understanding of global telecommunications sector with over 27 years of professional experience in telecommunications, product management, network architecture, strategy, and business development. He has also held various leadership roles in Nortel Networks, ECI Telecom, XTLS, and Oclaro. With this, we complete our panel introductions. Now we'll start with the questions. I would like to begin, with a word of thanks to all of you for making time today. Welcome all, and I hope we have interesting discussion today. We have the complete gamut of people, since from startups, from OEMs, from people with a innovation background. So we hope to make it quite interactive between all of us today. So before we begin, Manish, if it's okay, I can start with you. And my
Certainly,
question,
Rahul.
so Manish, how do you see SDN and NFE in building resilience and efficiency in the telecom networks? And also, how does automation enable the same?
Thank you, Rahul. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity, all the esteemed panel members. It's a great panel and a topic which is very near and dear to a lot of our hearts, definitely to mine as well. Um, and Rahul, you asked a very very loaded question. It's a question almost of the decade, and I think we should take a look at where we are and where we were honestly what we started this journey with. When we started almost 5 7 years ago, we said the telecom networks of the future needs to be built for the kind of agility that is required to innovate and to build new services for our customers. We also had a clear understanding and belief and conviction that the amount of traffic that this network is going to take going forward is going to increase exponentially. Hence, the cost of the network has to continuously go down because the revenues are not going to align along with the exponential increase in the traffic that increases the cost. So the cost per delivery of a bit has to constantly go down, while at the same time the network has to become a lot more agile. And I think when we started that journey, we said, the best way to do it is you start looking at the network not as a vertical separation of domains, so radio, core, OSS, and all that, because that's great, but that brings all of those networks together in a much more linear fashion. Versus what we needed was something that can scale exponentially. So we said we should split the network more horizontally. So take the infrastructure and let the infrastructure scale as the demand requires, and we can build the resiliency inside it, and then start stacking up on top of it the various functions that needs to be performed. And hence the SDN NFV was born, and the as we do as an industry, the standardization activity took its time, the implementation took its time. But now when we kind of look at where we are after those years, we still have a ways to go in terms of being able to achieve what we wanted to achieve, to be a hyper automated, resilient, and scalable network. And I think that's what we are very excited about, is that the continuation of this journey towards that the next gen of the container native, cloud native infrastructure that can actually make the network as a complete platform, and it can scale horizontally from any parts of the network, from the core access all the way to the edge of the enterprise customers at the MEC, or it can scale up and down based on what functions are you performing, whether it's a 5G core function, whether it's an OSS tools for the operations, and whole gamut of things that continue to evolve with that. So that's how I see it. Is the SDN NFV is been a journey, and our goal is to achieve the cloud scale, which is hyper scaled, hyper automated, and give the power of the network to the customer for them to define, decide, and how they want to use the network as a platform, and build all sorts of services as a open and innovative ecosystem on top of it.
So I'll move to Bernie. So Bernie, my question to you is on what is the importance of having an ecosystem for operators to address various enterprise use cases for SDN and NFV?
Yeah, thanks for that, Rahul. And maybe picking up on a point that Manish made as he was addressing us, was having the network as a platform. And certainly cloud native is going to allow us to treat that network as a platform, and as Manish explained, to be able to scale different parts of the network as it's needed for the different services that operators want to provide. And mobile operators, of course, have been offering to consumers mobile broadband for quite some time, but with 5G, what we're seeing is the ability to actually slice up that network, or what I like to say is the next version of SDN, which is to software define services on the underlay of the mobile network and provide different types of characteristics, not just bandwidth, but latency and security and high resilience and high reliability, right? Those are all different types of characteristics that enterprises are looking for in a mobile network of the future. And to address the use cases of enterprises, and there are many, we're seeing use cases come out of every industry, whether it's the transportation industry, healthcare, first responders, so on, right? They're all have unique use cases that, yes, can make use of these new combinations of characteristics from a network slice, but it goes the service that they're looking for goes way beyond just offering these characteristics, but you also need compute often out at the edge, or infrastructure in general out at the edge. You need, of course, the ability to host that infrastructure. And then you have a need for application providers that address the needs of those industries to come on board. And so what we're seeing in our engagements with enterprises and operators to address those enterprise needs is coming together of an ecosystem, as you mentioned, of the different ICT players. Of course, the mobile operator is key in that ecosystem, but also forms relationships with the infrastructure providers, might be hypercloud providers. It also forms relationships in specific verticals with application providers, whether it's startups or existing application providers that are looking to evolve their offerings from beyond being just on-premise offers, but also include the mobile network and the connectivity that mobile networks offer. So one example of that is something that Ericsson has announced recently, working with Telefonica Germany, where with Telefonica Germany and Amazon Web Services, we're working with a automotive application provider to address the use cases of automotive makers in Germany. And that ecosystem of 4 or 5 players is makes it possible to provide these new types of services to these automakers. Another example of that is in Australia, where we're working with Telstra and a hypercloud provider to address the needs of the banking industry, and to be able to offer innovative services that allow banks to address the needs of the changing needs of their customers as they want to consume their services through mobile platforms. So those are 2 small examples of how operators are working or building ecosystems in specific industries that they want to address, and they really want to lead the mobile operator wants to lead that service, the go-to-market of that service in their respective markets, and we at Ericsson help them bring together this ecosystem in order for them to do that. Maybe at a later time, I'll talk about some of the other use cases or even use places that we see this happening with the 5G networks. Sorry, Rahul, you're on mute again.
My bad. So thank you, Bernie. Now over to Jonathan. So Jonathan, coming to us a topic close to your heart. So how do you think SDN is positioned to provide multi-layered coordination, and what do you think is the ability from enabling a centralized point of view?
Yeah, thank you very much for allowing me to participate in this and for this very interesting question. But I'd like to start off with defining what SDN is. And I believe SDN is nothing more, nothing less than a centralized operating system for the network. And for SDN to work, it really needs two things. One is technical. It needs to have dynamically controllable resources in the network. And the other one is economic. It needs a business problem to solve. So I think we can all agree that the network has now evolved to the state that it's more dynamic, both at the IP layer, the packet layer, and even at the optical layer, with widespread use of advanced ROADM technology. So I don't want to go into the network layer. It's all there. What I'd like to focus on a little bit more is the business problems that we need to solve with SDN, and why it's important to have multi-layer coordination to do that. So when we look at the big picture, we talked about cloud native, and we really see that we're moving into a cloud native or a cloud-centric world. End users ranging from large enterprises to small and medium businesses, even to individual users, are spending more and more time accessing cloud-based applications. Even right now, as we're talking, we're using a cloud-based conferencing platform. And the expectations of end users is to be able to access applications, computing, storage resources as needed. The cloud infrastructure providers that deliver this kind of infrastructure for accessing and using these cloud-based applications will win. So it flows logically that the same holds true for the telecommunications networks that we're all using to access the cloud. I'd like to maintain that those providers that can deliver connectivity dynamically for different levels of bandwidth and resiliency, for example, in connecting to different levels of cloud applications when they want and from where they want, these are the telecommunications companies that will be the big winners. Now, those telecom companies, whether they're located in India or anywhere around the world, that can provide dynamic and differentiated telecommunication services will start to pull away from the pack. And this is where technologies, and these are technologies like SDN as well as NFV, come in. Because what they can do is help us to provide dynamic allocation of resources against continually shifting service demands. Now, how would we do that with a conventional network? I think the only approach to do that is to do massive over-provisioning. And this would require excessive capital, and it's just not economically feasible. What we really need is to make the most efficient use of resources in the network. What we need is a multi-layer SDN network that makes the most efficient use of IP routing, packet connectivity, and optical transport resources. And in fact, this is the approach that we are pursuing at Ribbon with our Muse SDN domain orchestrator, working with service providers in India and all around the world, built on a cloud-native PaaS. Muse Domain Orchestrator covers the entire network and services operations lifecycle, from planning through provisioning to analytics and assurance. And as a very modular microservices-based architecture, makes use of devices like templates, advanced path computation, and telemetry. But most important, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit later in the discussion, is SDN is not going to occur overnight. There's a lot of infrastructural issues that need to be overcome before SDN can be implemented. You have the existing network, including legacy parts of the network, and you have to also fit within an OSS BSS infrastructure. So from a practical point of view, SDN is going to occur over time. It needs to migrate into the network. And this is something we pay particular attention to in our approach, where we can start implementing patches of automation, perhaps sort of manually guided. This is actually something that we started a few years ago, working with Bharti Airtel as an example, to speed up their MPLS provisioning process. Fitting within their existing OSS BSS infrastructure, what we did was provided a series of templates that can be used to really, rather than define and engineer every service from scratch, a lot of the work based on the template selection could take place automatically, again, under human guidance, and then the service can be verified before it was turned up. So this is just an example of how we're working with our customers to introduce SDN to their networks over time in a practical way. But most importantly, it needs to start being multi-layer so that we can take a look at the entirety of the network and make the most efficient uses of all resources rather than over-provision layer by layer. Thanks very much. I look forward to talking a bit more later.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. Just continuing that, since I'll move to Sanjeev, because Sanjeev, you have seen the whole industry involved. You have been involved from the time of 2G and 3G and 4G, and now you're working 5G. So could you just extend it from Jonathan saying that there's going to be a migration and migration is going to be slow. So let's understand what are your views on how 5G will drive large scale SDN and NFV adoption.
Yeah, hi. Thanks everybody. So just carrying on from where Jonathan was speaking on, and he tried to define the SDN pretty well. I'd just like to go a little more basic than that. So what I see, SDN as not as a technology or a protocol, it is more as a design approach. What SDN did was, it did the separation or decoupling of the control plane and the data plane. So control plane is, where all the routing protocols, all the network information, all the decision making happens. And data plane is, of course, which as it should be, handling the forwarding of the packets, how to move the packets from which place to the other place. So it's basically handling the packet forwarding. So SDN is, in a very basic terms, is like decoupling the control plane and the data plane. But what it does is it provides so much flexibility of introduction of new services, reconfiguring the network on the fly without, disrupting the hardware, without disrupting the network, moving the decision making or the logic to the software as far as possible, and making the devices, which are the switches, routers, as thin as possible, so that that brings the flexibility. If I have to reconfigure a service, if I have to provide a new service to the customer, this is where the flexibility and the benefits of SDN come into picture. Now, it has been there for quite some time. The concept has been there. There have been protocols evolving, OpenFlow and other protocols. But there have been challenges in interoperability between the different components. The different types of applications that have been available, and of course the infrastructure challenges where there is so much network which is already laid out. Changing that and all that. But now I feel that the tipping point, is going to be the adoption of 5G networks. And why I say so is the way the 5G network and the technology has been defined right from scratch is the validation of the SDN concept. So it is in 5G when you handle the core network which handles all the packet, all the huge amount of traffic, gigabytes of traffic going in the 5G network. So that has been defined in the specifications right from scratch, from beginning, in a way that the control plane and the data plane is separated out. So that basically validates the SDN concept and SDN technology. And I believe that is going to be the tipping point for its, proliferation, for its adoption. Now we, as an instance, we have developed the user plane function of 5G, which handles all the packet flows of 5G traffic going into the network. And we have, because it is defined in the specifications, the protocols are defined, the way 5G network is going to be laid out, that has been defined. It's been very easy to interoperate this user plane function with control plane of other partners and vendors. And that gives so much flexibility to the telcos, to the CSPs, to combine different software elements to get the flexibility of 5G. And I see that as 5G deployment grows, the SDN NFV is automatically going to proliferate, and the benefits are going to filter to the other domains as well. Now this, as another instance, one of the benefits that it provides, and which is so inherent in 5G, is the network slicing. So it, in 5G, basically, It allows so many different types of services, and that is where another example of flexibility that this SDN NFV concept provides. In 5G, you can have services which need high broadband, which are high bandwidth, high data rates, which we are so used to the services like IoT, where the data is very small, it is sporadic, but it could be very frequent, and the number of devices could be very huge. To mission critical applications, such as healthcare, robotics, gaming, where latency is very important. So with the same network resources, now with SDN inherently there in the 5G, it is possible to have the elements or the resources residing in the edge or in the core network to enable all these different types of services and provision them so that they can meet the characteristics required for different types of services. I mean, this wouldn't have been possible if the basic architecture was not based on the separation or decoupling of control plane and data plane. So I think it is definitely going to be the of great advantage to telcos and CSPs, and the adoption of 5G is going to increase the adoption of SDN NFV as well. Yeah, thank you.
I'll move to Krithiga. So Krithiga, from purely from your side, could you tell us some benefits that your clients have seen and you have experienced them, and some relatable case studies which are pertinent to the Indian market?
Sure. First of all, thank you, Rahul, and thank you to the esteemed panelists. Amazing insights, and you tend to get different perspectives on the same topic when you have such a varied group of people. So the way we look at it from a Red Hat perspective is we are seeing that customers are no longer in a adoption phase. They are more in an acceleration and just sort of moving at jet speed towards the whole adoption of taking this into a cloud-based architecture, right? And if I look at there are some from Red Hat's perspective, 5 key areas that we're seeing telcos are spending, and cloud is definitely one of them. No longer are applications, and I'm talking it from a user perspective, right? No longer are it's just purely looked at as packet core or just pure telco sort of applications. We're looking at how do we move IT applications as well, and that's the change and the dramatic shift in terms of looking at creating this SDN NFV layer and having this more of a cloud-based architecture and moving applications so that it goes more closer towards the customer, more closer towards handling use cases for instant instant gratification for the customer at the end of the day, because getting towards the edge. This is now creating a unique, and somebody in the panel as well said that this is more of an architecture construct, right, rather than just pure technology or software. So this is now laying a foundation for our customers to now start looking at adopting and going towards the new buzz, which is your cloud native transformation. How do we start looking at that? And if I look at the operators in India, and we have Mudit as well, who's on the panel, and we've worked very closely with him and his team on realizing their vision of how do we get a universal hybrid cloud for them? How do we get that as a base, and how do they start jumpstart and leapfrogging on having the controls within their hands, right, and open standards? So the innovation that we are doing in this space, it's a journey as we see, and the journey, each customer is at different points in this particular journey, and we are walking with them and understanding the use cases that they need and starting to work. So even as we look at cloud native transformation as a journey, we are walking with them, and there's a huge opportunity for us to make sure that there is tremendous capex and tremendous opex savings, that we can get back to the customers. They can then plow this back, and at the end of the day, the benefits that they're realizing is how do we innovate more, how do we create new business streams and new revenue streams, and at the end of the day, it's about how this can be beneficial both from an operational perspective as well as from a revenue stream perspective. And that's where Red Hat's sweet spot is, and we're working very, very closely, both globally and locally, with our customers here.
Thank you, Krithiga. So moving from where Krithiga left off to coming to Mudit finally. So Mudit, you present a telco at the end of the day, and you, I believe you started your cloud journey or transformation journey a couple of years back. So as a telco, how have you embraced SDN and NFV, and what is the current level of adoption that you have? And if you would also tell us what is the kind of challenges you've had along the way.
Thank you, Rahul, and I think Krithiga, Manish, Sanjeev have laid out the PML quite well. Let me add a dimension to the point that SDN and NFV are not technologies; they are the pivot. They are pivotal and central to India's digital agenda. And let me play out the straw man on how this makes sense. So we know that India has seen an unprecedented data surge. The traffic that we have seen, so today, if you see the traffic that India carries, the data traffic that India carries is upwards of 800 crores gigabytes per month. That's the kind of data traffic India is running. It's quite humongous. With more than 600 million smartphone users, and do you know we do all of this at a cost which is around rupees 8 per GB. So at such low cost levels, at such low price levels, and this is pretty well researched and published, India has possibly the lowest price points. And if you see, we also have a very large consumption. Now juxtapose this against the digital enablement this is leading to. So if you see, today we have more than 1 billion Aadhaar users. We have more than 700 million social internet users. We have about 400, 500 people who are using on the social media and for internet usage, etc. Now that is the kind of consumption we are seeing. Now, if you see all of this is driven by cloud, is driven by SDN and NFV. And why is that? Three things. One, SDN and NFV. What was the story prior to that? Prior to that, at every core location, we had different PNFs, different physical network functions. So for data core, we will have a separate unit, and within data core, there would be 7 or 8 different functions. SP gateway separate, MME separate, policy separate, charging separate, CGNet separate, and we would have voltage, or we would have CS core and media gateways and MSS, and we would have signaling and databases. All of these would be different boxes consuming racks, power, energy, cost, OPEX, and CAPEX. Now, if we had to use that infrastructure to build the kind of data surge that we built, it would have been impossible. Now, what did cloud do? Cloud converted all of these applications as software, which sits on a shared universal cloud, as Krithiga mentioned. And now you can imagine if multiple applications are consuming a shared cloud, what does it do to the cost? You don't have duplicated boxes. The infrastructure utilization is significantly better. And now that creates an efficiency which is unprecedented. And what does it do? As an outcome of this, we have been able to put 80 plus locations, cloud locations, running commercial traffic, which is possibly the largest in the world. And we have been able to do this using open source components, which gives a humongous cost advantage. We have been earlier, when you used to build all of these PNFs, it used to took months and months to put up a core site. Now, this software-based scale-outs can be automated and can be done in a matter of hours. And this is what has enabled the steep surge in data consumption that India has seen. And this has enabled India's digital agenda. Now, if you look at India population, India has the biggest demographic dividend, possibly one of the largest people in the working age group. And in the next couple of years, at the turn of the decade, we would be the largest, even going a clip above China. And this digital enablement is going to drive their productivity. And we are clearly seeing this. And therefore, and all of this agenda is enabled by cloud technologies, by SDN, by NFV. If we rely on previous physical-based networks, we could never have achieved any of this, what we have done. So therefore, I would say that SDN and NFV is not only a bunch of technologies, it is the cornerstone, it is the pivot around which the India's digital agenda is centered. And that is how we see it. And these are the benefits that we have reaped as an advantage. Now, as we went along the way, what were the challenges that we saw? So it required a huge evolution of the ecosystem. Migrating these core locations to cloud-based systems require a lot of development on the chipsets, a lot of deployments of virtualization technologies, on how the data path algorithms will work, etc., etc. And we had to work with a large set of ecosystem and drive them to come to one common denominator. And those are the kind of challenges we have worked, and a lot of challenges we have overcome. And now we are at a state of maturity where we are running massive scale systems on cloud. And I think that is where we are. And I think that has been quite central to our success.
Rahul, you're on mute.
My apologies. So coming from where Mudit left, so I go back to Jonathan. So Jonathan, Mudit talked about demand drivers and business drivers for making the switch to cloudification and virtualization of the network. What are the other business drivers, and how do you feel is the overall readiness in the global market? And how do you believe will it going forward impact competition and innovation?
By the way, I'm very happy to hear, Mudit, that you guys are going at cloud speed towards a cloud native infrastructure. This is something which has taken a long time in terms of how the world has sort of been able to adopt these technologies. It started off with a big SDN and small NFV, and I think one of the things that you emphasized over here is that over the last few years, we've been able to see the largest returns from a investment in an NFV architecture, replacing a lot of the physical boxes and consolidating them on a common set of computing resources. And certainly that will continue as we get more and more efficient computing technologies that we can start emulating a lot of the previously hardware-based functions and putting them as software. And now probably as an industry, we're starting to sort of shift our attention back to the SDN side, which is the overall control plane for these types of technologies. One of the things that we see is that people do want to embrace it, but there are certain barriers that need to be overcome. As I mentioned before, both you need to deal with some of the legacy network infrastructure that's not really controllable from an SDN point of view, and you also need to fit into an existing OSS BSS infrastructure. So modernization needs to take place at many parts of the network all at one time. And again, it needs to be driven in terms of providing true value in terms of the business of the company, certainly not technology for its own sake. So again, as was mentioned before, 5G could certainly be one of the drivers for that as we start to get enterprises in particular. One of the first places that we see 5G being adopted is in private virtual networks based on a 5G type of infrastructure, where you need to have hard segmentation in terms of the resources dedicated to those particular enterprises. And here we can start using constructs such as network slicing powered by an SDN and NFV infrastructure to deliver the hard services segregation, but all based on a common network infrastructure for delivering that kind of 5G services infrastructure to those enterprises. So again, that is one of the sort of major use cases that we see that will start to be adopted around the world. So it's been a long time in the making. I was thinking about this sort of before the call. If you take a look at SDN as an operating system or a centralized operating system, I was trying to compare it to our sort of PC operating systems. So Windows 1 on our PCs sort of came out in 1985. We didn't get to Windows 10 30 years later in 2015. We've been talking about SDN now for maybe just a bit over 20 years. So we're sort of reaching maybe the knee of the curve where these kinds of technologies will start to become adopted much more rapidly as people become familiar with them and they reach a critical mass that we can all start to benefit from them. And certainly that's our view working with customers around the world, including in India, of course.
So, Bernie, how do you address the impact on competition and innovation? That's something I would like to hear from you.
Yeah, certainly. I think from an operator's perspective, a mobile operator's perspective, with 5G coming along and the ability to customize your network and adjust your network resources to meet your customers' demands, ultimately you'll be able to compete as an operator by being close to your customer and listening to their needs in order to offer them. And I think it was Jonathan that talked about that the network being a platform for innovating services on that platform by combining the various characteristics of the network in order to meet the customer's demands. And whether the customer is a consumer concerned about services in their personal life, or services being offered by governments and society in general, or industries looking to innovate, that this 5G network platform offers all of them an ability to innovate with the services in order for them to in turn meet their own needs and their own their own demands of their customers. So certainly 5G is an innovative platform. We've mentioned network slicing a number of times, and that's going to be the key to offering these new types of services, which will start to dream up as we learn more and more about the capabilities of these networks.
Before you close, Bernie, one more question to you. So, in terms of critical success factors, and what is your view in terms of people competencies that will help reduce the overall time to market and enable the whole ecosystem?
Yeah, of course. With new technologies, always comes the need for building new competencies, and I think. Well, I know, in fact, from our experience at Ericsson, that India has a large talent pool that is ready to actually build those competencies. And we at Ericsson have actually leveraged this pool of talent to bring up engineers and various other roles that are required in operating these networks. And we ourselves have benefited from the pool by actually teaching, whether it's teaching and providing experience with around cloud, around obviously SDN, the new cloud native technologies, and 5G core technologies, so much so that we have now a global services organization based out of India, servicing all of our customers around the world for these new 5G networks that are being rolled out.
Thank you, Bud. I'll move to Manish. So, Manish, being a prolific innovator with several patents to your name. So, how do you see innovation happening differently now, and how do you visualize the network as a distributed cloud, and how do you foresee the application ecosystem going forward?
No, absolutely. No. So first of all, actually, I want to just stress back on what Mudit ji said earlier, that the scale that India has seen in terms of the amount of traffic it's carrying. And I think Mudit ji, you mentioned about 80 sites that you are distributing, which can only happen if you have a cloud native network and you can start to scale it closer and closer to the customers. So I think the scale and efficiency problem statement is very well understood for how SDN and NFV can play a role. But I also often ask a question to ourselves that, if we were a 25-year-old starting in this industry, would we design, build, and operate the network the same way? Sometimes having an experience of the last 20 years creates bottlenecks in terms of how we think. And so one of the very important steps that we took was, when we talk about the tool like SDN NFV that becomes available, how do we use the tool in a very different way so that it actually goes about efficiently utilization of that tool for its purposes, Not like, when, as they say, for a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Not that way, right? So it has that impact across all aspects. We talked about the people part of it. We talked about the technology part of it. We talked about the ecosystem part of it. But it's also about the processes and how do you do it. And how do you operate a network like that? I mean, it has to be operated in a very different way. Typically, the waterfall model of designing, building, and operating a network, where you have a planning and engineering and the operations as sort of multiple streams that work within the implementation streams. And that sort of a waterfall model doesn't work anymore because things are changing way too fast. And you are almost doing continuous changes. You are integrating new functionality on a continuous basis. And so it's a very DevOps centric world as we talk about it, right? And that's one of the things that we took it as from our role as a system integrator, that how can a system integrator play completely a role to enable the innovation that you just talked about, Rahul, and said, as if you look at as a traditional SI, it would look like you are talking about multiple functions that needs to be with open interfaces that needs to be tested, validated, and put it as a system so that it works. In the new world where you're talking about DevOps, which is all distributed, all open, everything is happening at the speed of the software and distributed and scaling at the speed of the cloud, you need to do an integration at a much faster pace. And hence we reinvented ourselves, and we are calling ourselves not a system integrator anymore. We are a continuous integrator. And the CI.next is what we believe is what takes to take the SDN NFV into the production, into the operational of it, and hence bring the entire innovation ecosystem on top of it. That allows you basically to say that now that I have built the network, it basically allows me to say if a new solution provider somewhere sitting in the garage, which is what we all dreamed for the telecom industry to enable, like what it did for the software industry, is somebody comes up with an idea, is that what's the time it takes from the idea in a head to the realization for a customer, and how do we shorten that cycle? And that's a KPI that we need to measure as a continuous integrator. So that's what we worked on it. And innovation, like you said, is really about an enablement. It creates a network now as a platform. So a new function comes in. Now you have a CI/CD pipeline that allows you to take the function very quickly into your planning horizons as an operator. You can start to say, okay, how do I now look at the impact of this new thing for any other parts of my network? Does it scale fine? Does it perform well? And where you quickly push it into the production, half of that or maybe 80% of that is automated. So you are really not doing too much of human intervention, and you are moving the innovation from somebody's head into the customer's hand very fast. And that's where I think the ecosystem, the innovation will happen. And the idea of saying is that me as an operator or as a vendor will actually be an innovator is sort of a legacy. I think that model is dead from my perspective. It's really all about opening the ecosystem and letting everybody innovate and make the network as a platform to work on top of it.
Thank you, Manish. Now, again, from an innovation perspective, now question to Sanjeev. So, Sanjeev, you are probably the youngest, organization in the panel today, and probably one of the very niche firms which does this kind of product development and research. So, as a startup in this domain, what are the kind of challenges and opportunities that you foresee?
Yeah, sure. So I think what we are doing is as we are we're building solutions for our customers, and as well as building frameworks for 5G, SD-WAN, SDN NFV. So what we are focusing on are, we believe that open source technologies in this domain are going to play a big role. So we are focusing on expanding the expertise, building the expertise, reusing the open source as far as possible. There are some other technologies which are really enabling the network function to be virtualized, especially if you look at DPTK, inter-DPTK, and vector packet processing. So these are the sort of frameworks that are enabling the real cloud native or virtualization of the network function, and these are going to be drivers in in having the new generation of products, whether it is telecom products, or networking products, or SD-WAN products. So these are the sort of technologies or underlying frameworks that are going to drive that. So our focus is on how we adapt or how we build the architect the solutions, reusing all these technologies to achieve the scale and the efficiency, similar to the physical network appliances, how to replicate that as a NFV and in the end as SDN concept. So that is what we are focusing on, and we're building, solutions reusing these to be cloud native.
Thank you, Sanjeev. So coming to Krithiga, so we talked about the technologies, we talked about the innovation. So we don't want you to talk about the skill and the supply and demand. So in terms of supply and demand of skill, are skill shortages around this solutions an issue that we are not addressing yet?
Um, Somebody also said on the panel that we've been talking about SDN NFV for 20 years, and now we're starting to see it accelerate. Every technology will take its its curve in terms of building and it becoming mainstream. A couple of years ago, we never had administrators for, let's say, Unix, and then that became mainstream, and then you had so many, right? So this is going to have its evolution. Having said that, from a perspective that something as critical as this, as we are talking about, we're moving into cloud native architectures, and Manish brilliantly talked about the whole DevOps piece as well, that it's now becoming beyond just technology and software, right? It's becoming a whole culture thing. And it's often said, culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? So if you have a strategy but you don't create a culture of evolution of the skills in the team, whether it's from the OEMs or from the service providers you're getting, or within yourself, it is going to be a challenge, right? So thinking about how we can innovate. So if you look at how, from a Red Hat perspective, we've started looking at this very, very closely and very, very in a critical fashion. Our entire training organization is looking at how do we start doing an outreach program and going into campuses and getting a campus to corporate sort of strategy together and making sure that skills are available. The second aspect is obviously when you're getting into the first of its kind, right? Having niche players like the OEM service providers coming in and sort of building those architectures and having an ecosystem that is built that starts leveraging off the skills that's there. And the third most important is we just don't look at talking about culture transformation within Red Hat, right? We imbibe the ethos of open source, where it's about bringing the entire ecosystem together, and how do you then translate the open practice principles of taking a particular vision in somebody's head and then realizing it and going through that entire exercise of coming up with sort of an MVP. So we have something called as, we do a open innovation lab, where we sit with the customers and go through the whole DevOps piece, right? Where we, along with the customers, are training them, working with them, doing a lot of hackathons, doing pair programmings, and then taking, in a fun way, creating a culture of how can all the teams come together and no longer waterfall model, no longer wait for something to happen in 6 months and then it fail, but doing quick sprints, bringing the whole DevOps ethos and culture into our customers' organization and being part of that and helping them in that journey, 6 to 8 weeks, working with them and getting transferring that knowledge and making sure that the skills get transferred to our customers as well. So we're looking at it at both angles. One is obviously from a training perspective, making sure there's more skills proliferation in the market all the way from campus, and also helping our customers work with them and sort of transferring those skills in a true open source fashion into their organization as well.
Interesting. So last question, back to you, Mudit. So, since you mentioned you built a considerable amount of IP using open source, and what are your kind of next steps, and how do you monetize the IP and the expertise that you've gained thus far?
So basically, maybe 2 or 3 things. One, what we need to do on the technology front, and then how do we connect ourselves to the digital aspiration of the country. So let me talk about these two things. On the technology front, of course, Krithiga and Manish talked very well about how we want to, how we need to put DevOps in networks so that all from concept to design to engineering to testing to canary testing and to production, it's a seamless pipeline. And we do that fast, and that is critical. So of course, DevOps is going to be the CI/CD is going to be the key thing that we are working on. Doing cloud native, doing 5G migrations, container deployments, microservices, all of those are critical technologies which will continue to enable a lot of things that we are trying to achieve. But then where does all this technology lead to? How do we make it relevant for the consumers, for our business, and for the ecosystem? So the entire productivity upliftment that we can do by doing smart factories, by doing by taking this cloud and enabling, by taking AI at edge, by enabling medicine in rural areas, by making universities smart universities, by providing drone as a service and improving the maintenance of oil and gas industry, for example, by providing construction safety. So these, by ensuring connected car. So these are a large number of use cases that are waiting to be explored. And there's a huge amount of value which is going to be created for the individual citizens and for the society at large. Now, how can we do this? So, for example, there are a large number of people in rural areas, and they have land, but they don't have enough finances. Now, they need shared tools. They need shared tractors. You can form blockchain communities. You can authenticate. And for these, what you need authentication APIs, you need location APIs, etc., etc. And you need to create a consistent API layer. And you need to enable artificial intelligence at edge. And if you put these couple of things together, the entire infrastructure that telco has, what do telco has? So we as telco have presence in 200,000 locations. We have fiber points at more than 40,000 locations. So we are present across the length and breadth of the country. We have a spectrum that connects several hundreds of millions of users, and they connect them while they are moving. Now, if we put AI along with connectivity, we enable and we unleash all of these use cases. So large amount of unorganized sector, rural sector, who do not have an access to a digital platform, a marketplace like Flipkart has, can use this consistent API as a marketplace. They can plug in, they can reach their production to large number of customers. And by giving all of these services to enterprises, to SMEs, to customers, we will unleash a productivity revolution in India. And I think that is what is next. And that is what needs the entire ecosystem to come together and happen. Now, some of this could be dependent on 5G spectrum, and a lot of that has nothing to do with 5G spectrum. It has to do with building this ecosystem, building this consistent API layer, building standard protocols, getting applications to connect and consume this artificial intelligence at edge, making communities, getting adoption, enabling this authentication to be used by insurance companies, by Olas, by Uber, etc. And I think that is what is next, and that is what is critical. And I think that is what will drive the productivity. And when I started my conversation, I said, India has a very large working population. We also know that we may have the lowest productivity on a per capita basis. May not be the lowest, but amongst the lowest quartile in the countries. And this digital enablement can unleash productivity in rural areas, in farming areas, the production that gets to waste while coming from farm to the marketplace, for example. Or it can improve the productivity of a small seller who will get a marketplace, or it will improve the productivity of our factories which are waiting for supplies. All of this automation and digital agenda and enabling the productivity gains is, I think, what is next, what we should together build.
Thank you, Mudit. Just one last question that and that's open to any of you, which is regarding. Do you think there are any significant barriers that are still preventing the large-scale adoption of network virtualization? And what would be the mitigating factors towards making the adoption faster and closer to the market real time?
Yeah, I can maybe share just a quick perspective on that one. I think the biggest challenge is that we have a history of 20 years of assets that the industry has built. So there is always a challenge about transformation of all of that into the new architecture. That takes time. But to me, it's also about culture that Krithiga talked about is very important. So I see that if what took us 20 years should take us 2 years going forward, that's the speed of the cloud that we really want to achieve. And to do that, it has to come from a technology, people, process, and the culture perspective, which we have discussed. But also it has to make a absolute business sense to transform everything that we have got. And I kind of look at, there is always going to be a trigger points. Maybe 5G is that trigger point where that will completely say, to implement 5G, I need this, and hence I'm going to put everything on it and allow that transformation to happen faster.
I think I'll add 2 points to that, right? There are 2 possible blocks which can drive up the adoption of cloud. So number 1 is, of course, monetization. So can cloud enable new monetization cases? And therefore, would people want to invest behind it? And that requires the ecosystem that we talked about, right? Smart retail, smart universities, smart cities, smart factories, all of that. So there's a huge money. But if that money can come to bear, that will drive the investment that is needed for adoption. I think that's one. Second, if you see in telco, for example, there are large number of technology providers, and each have their application, and they want to hold on to it. They want to hold on to the current way of doing it because that is how their revenue and profitability work. Now, if they let the model be disaggregated and cloudified, they fear that it will shake their market share. Now, this fear has to be replaced by a larger opportunity that we can make them see. And this would be critical. And this is what Jonathan very rightly said. We need controllers which can look at various aspects of the stack, not only the IP, but the optics, not only at the IP and optics in MPLS WAN, but in the telecom, telco, DC data center as well. So we need these controllers who talk seamlessly across the layers, and then is when the value will be unleashed. And to do that, the stakeholders, the different vendors and the partners we have to show them value, and we have to remove the fear that they will lose their share if they were to open up their protocols and come to an interoperability a kind of a paradigm. So those are 2 blocks that we possibly need to unblock.
Thank you, Mudit. Any other thoughts? Concluding remarks?
Yeah, actually, I think the way Mudit just summarized it, I think was excellent, the last 2 speakers. It's a matter of making it a win-win for everyone in the industry, from the solutions providers to the service providers to the end users. And as we start to see successes in terms of these vertical use cases, certainly people will want to emulate that, and it will speed up the overall adoption towards this new kind of paradigm. So my thanks and for I think some really great insights from the panelists over here.
Absolutely. So I think it's been a fair amount of views across the whole spectrum. We talked about demand drivers, we talked about cost, we talked about agility, we talked about new age applications. We got to hear about IP creation, skill development, so much so. And thanks a lot for explicit views. Very, very diverse in terms of what is exactly happening in the world. So right on that note, I'd kind of thank all of us in the panel, and we all definitely agree that network virtualization is the way forward, and it's giving us new ways to build and design networks and pave the way for adoption of all future technologies and edge computing around the world. So that's all from our side, and on behalf of IMC and KPMG, I thank everyone for being a part of this very, very informative discussion. Wishing you all a very happy New Year well in advance. Happy holidays. Stay safe. Thanks a lot once again.
Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.